So I took the nose and I took the lips and I was like, let's talk about the beauty of blackness, gall of blackness to be defined in the fact that we know that these things are happening. And so the water has an opportunity to speak, and I'll help it speak by just kind of splashing more water onto the surface. Super interesting. Then there's people who give up on you, even if the work is fantastic. They're like, well, we can't benefit from this in one way or another. I think AI is really good at a lot of different things in terms of opportunities for quick and easy shortcuts to some things that will help out humans. But you obviously know that there's so many people that are doing stuff with AI in terms of especially the deep fake. They understood that stress affects your body so much more than any outside things. Like, yeah, you don't want to do those things because you essentially could live less, but what also makes it so that you die early is stress.
Khari, thank you
Hey,
so much and welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Artifacts podcast. It is such a pleasure to have you. I've been looking forward to chatting with you. So thank you for being here.
thank you for having me. I love it.
Amazing. So let's jump right into it. And so first I want to ask you, who would you like to dedicate this podcast episode to?
As far as anybody to dedicate, it would definitely be all of my school art teachers, one for sure, and then my mom, my grandmother, and especially my grandfather because he was the artist of the family, and so he was the one who I really leaned towards in terms of inspiration to make and continue making art. So those people for sure.
Amazing. Well, let's dedicate it to them and let's have a great conversation.
Looking
So
forward to it.
I first wanted to ask you sort of like how you got involved in art because when I saw your work for the first time in person, we actually had an exhibition Christie's at the auction house by Destiny Rosa. And that was the first time that I had seen your work in person and I fell madly in love with your work and have been, following you ever since and just, really inspired by your journey. So how did you first come to art? Like what made you decide to do it?
Well, it started off with my grandfather and kind of initially art being a opportunity to avoid, I guess I would say, bullies. Talent is looked greatly upon in any community, especially one that involves bullies. And so like if bullies see that you're good at something, they may stop bullying you to have you do something. So like when I started drawing it, draw me something. And so it turned into like I never got beat up or it was lunch money, but it would just people would pick on me. So it was one of those things where it stopped once I was starting to draw a little bit better. And again, my grandfather and his life as a draftsman was really important in terms of my visualization of how drawing actually happens. Because I think a lot of people that actually don't see how art is made, and so they assume that it's kind of magical. But when you see a person take a pencil to a paper and create something out of nothing, you're like, oh, that's not that crazy. I should be able to do something like that. And so seeing him make art, I was like, yeah, I could do this. And I love doing it. And I want him to draw something for me so that I can draw it later. And that's usually how I got down to it. Like I had like a jet plane poster that he'd be like, draw this jet. He would draw it in front of me and then I would try to redraw the same way he was drawing.
Oh, that's amazing to have someone directly impact you, your family. I thought about what you had just mentioned about proximity, being able to demystify what it means to make art. It's actually happened to me as well. Like when you see a studio or you see work, how did this just like appear? So
Yeah.
it actually, yeah, makes it easily accessible. So thank you for sharing that. But I want to talk to you a little bit about your artist statement because it impacted me greatly. You sent it in. I love reading about your work. So you talk about invoking history, transformation, ancestral connection through water in your work. What does it mean to you to be a storyteller through materials, but water in particular?
The storyteller aspect of the work really came through time and growth. I think there's always this concept with artists that you can make great art even when you're young, which is very true, but there's certain things that happen in your life that really start to develop the language that you create when you make work. And I didn't really pay attention to that until I started getting older and my work started to change. So essentially, the storytelling aspect through water really came between the reactions to the environment around me and me also trying to reconnect back to what is or who I am, particularly am. So, in that regards, water has always been a part of my life. It's been a kind of conscionable and unconscious thing that I always look to water as a resource for both healing, for contemplation, for guiding me through times of rough and difficult situations, specifically because I grew up next to one of the Great Lakes. So I went to beaches. Often there's a pond, a large kind of pond next to my grandparents' home, which I spent a lot of time at. And so water was always the best place for me to kind of create and think about just anything that was happening. So I would stop if I'm going through stress, I would go to water. But again, being older, I was like, all right, I want to make art about something that's inspiring to me, but also isn't emotionally or mentally draining as talking about only the hardships of being black in America. And so I was like, okay, well, what am I interested in? I was like, I love water. And water holds a lot. So like I can still talk about kind of these struggles that I really want to engage with in terms of the black identity, especially in America. But in doing so, I can also create space for water to inherit its natural traits of kind of being a tranquil space for me, or an opportunity for growth, or an opportunity for knowledge. I used to watch this movie and I can't remember the title of it now, but one of the quotes in the movie was like, the edge of the water is where the ocean leaves its messages. And it's like
That's
thinking of,
good.
yeah, I know, right? I heard that in a movie. And I was like, oh, and it was like an animated movie. I can't remember what the name of it is, but that idea of the ocean's edge being the point where the water speaks to you was something that I seen this movie after I started my process, but it really started clicking to me like there's something that I hear at the edge of the water that I'm not seeing, but that really is internally affecting me. And so that journey between kind of understanding who I am, where I came from, and what brings me to those places also is the reason why I start thinking about who I am, how did I get here? And if I think about the Middle Passage, there's a huge history there that essentially I don't actually know where that lineage goes, how far it goes back, or all the people after or before that. I know the people after that, but I don't know the people before that. And so, yeah, it really made me feel like a certain type of relationship to water as a tranquil space, but also water as the journey that both brought me here in both kind of mental spaces but also physical spaces through enslavement and the Middle Passage.
Gosh, that was so beautiful. Honestly, that was so beautiful because, water is it's like our life force, right? It's
Yeah.
such a beautiful thing that is incorporated in our everyday life. It's in our bodies. Even writing your artist statement, like the fact that we were made up like 60% water,
Yes.
like it's everything. And
Yes.
water is also, it holds memory and it shape shifts and, it allows us to be in flow. And so I really resonated with that. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's such a beautiful thing that you're exploring, particularly as it relates to the African diaspora, because we all have a relationship with water. And in some
Hmm.
instances, it has been traumatic. It has been traumatic in some instances, but there's so much beauty in that as well. So I love that you're using this material as a tool for transformation. And so, yeah, I really love that. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about, your images. Like you focus on painting, you
Hmm.
paint black noses, lips,
Hmm.
appendages. Was curious about why you isolate these features and what conversations do you hope that they bring in your work.
Yeah, so I think this is again part of the conversation of growth through age. And so essentially, I came back to this idea of trying to make art that I could love to make without being emotionally and mentally damaged. So essentially, when I first started making art in undergrad, even though I went to undergrad a little bit older, I wanted to make art that was really kind of power to the people S forward. I wanted to create art that was specifically talking about the injustices that I see that people were acknowledging but would also not acknowledge. There's a lot of relationship between the things that happen to black people and the actions that black people take to those things being done to them, and also now we're just victims and we are asking for it, or this is just our nature, or things that are obviously racist in one way or another, pointing back like, if we burn down your town and you try to come rob us, like, why are you robbing us? You're That's a bad black person. You just burnt down our town. Anyway, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And it's like, why would I do that? You just found out. Or you drowned my town, or you
Right.
hidden it somewhere, or you steamrolled and then blocked me from being able to buy homes. Like there's a lot of different things that have been done to black people, but are now all just kind of gone. And if
Mm.
you're in your situation, it's because you're in your situation. So in the beginning, I was like, I see that Milwaukee is very racially segregated, so it's really divided up by highways and by bus lines, and it's really bad. But essentially, everybody kind of acknowledges that's the way it is. And in some ways, I definitely want to get back to my community. But past all of that, after seeing all those things, I wanted to talk about privatized prisons. And one of the things in my research on talking about these prisons is that people with wider noses, thicker lips, and darker skin get longer prison sentences in the United States. So the more African-esque features that you have, the longer they're willing to put you in jail. And considering in the
Mhm.
states that if a state has a private prison and they don't fill all the beds in the private prison, the state has to pay the prison for the
Okay.
amount of those beds is a weird thing, because that means that you have to criminalize people so that you don't get charged
Have to
for it.
pay. Right.
So it
That's
really
crazy.
puts you in a position where it's like, well, who's the most vulnerable? Who can we pick up quickly? And then who can we have in there for long periods of time so we don't have to pay this money? And it's like, yes, obviously, ethnic groups that are not pleasant towards your community, and essentially yours is in quotations here, become a target of that harassment. And so if you think about it, it's like you look like even more of a African. You're like, what are you talking about? It's like, yeah, you get extra time. And
Right.
so it was crazy to come onto that research because, obviously we know all of these things happen, but that specific way of thinking about it and
Mhm.
seeing it really reflected on me in terms of the relationship I wanted to have with art at that time. So I did that, and I talked about the nose and the lips as those kind of signifiers. But then after again growing and being like, I don't want to make art that is mentally taxing for me. Like it's great that I can get those messages out, but like doing all of that research, putting myself in that position to be thinking about this constant anger that'll happen when you question these things was not something that I wanted to give back, because essentially too, black people know these things. So like if I make these works and I create this message, if the people that I'm essentially wanting to affect with these messages do not receive it, then what is the point of me making it? And that really came
100%.
because my senior thesis. So my senior thesis, I did a whole show about police brutality. And at the end of my senior thesis, somebody wrote in one of my books, it was like, what's this seems biased. What's the side of the police? And it was like, why am I caring about the side of the police
Right.
in this? This is this
The
is
proof is in
done.
the pudding.
Yeah, yeah. There was literally a video in my senior thesis of a white officer telling a white woman who was scared of the police officer that she shouldn't be scared because she is not black. And somebody was like, this is bias. It's like,
Uh,
what am I making this work for people to is immediately dismiss it if I show them pure film?
well,
And it's like, why am I putting myself through this if I'm gonna be doing I don't want to make work like this, and I don't want to have to argue with people who are, in that way. And it's not like I gave up on it, but I don't feel like that's a lane that I need to stick into. I
right.
feel like I can do more to uplift people than to create space to remind them of their traumas, even though they already acknowledge those things. And then for other people to pacify the message as victim complex or some other thing other than the very clear proof that this actually happened. And so I was like, no, so I took the nose and I took the lips and I was like, let's talk about the beauty of blackness, the gall of blackness to be defined in the fact that we know that these things are happening. How do I acknowledge that those things are both, falters for somebody else, but pride for me and people who kind of look like me? And how do I create space where we're all connected through something? And water was my way of doing that in terms of the relationship between connection. Because again, at the beginning of this, I really was thinking about, all the injustices. And I was like, well, those injustices are going to stay there. And there's people who are obviously, if you can see what's happening in America now, are like, yeah, let's definitely push forward more injustice as hard as
Right.
we can, and they don't care. They don't
Yeah.
care. So the point point being is just to create work that makes me happy, that I want to give back, and that I also want you to think about what happens. But the point being is that when other black people are looking at this work, they feel relaxed. They feel at
Mm,
home. They feel honored and also accepted, acknowledged
yes,
of their past, but also not shown in a way where like that makes them only who they are. Because that's the second thing. It's like you don't want to monopolize the image of blackness. Like
right.
I don't need to make all images of black people searching for freedom. Like I can
Mm,
make a picture of a person sitting on their couch and relaxing. And obviously, I think there's a lot of art that wants to center towards that more because I think there's so many younger black artists who are like, "Hey, I don't want to talk about slavery all the time.
right.
We know it, and they will deny it. So, like, I'm gonna make something I really enjoy.
Yeah,
I'll mention
exactly.
huge, but I'm not going to
Make that the
make my whole
focus.
thing. Yeah. So that's where that all started from. That was kind of long winded, but
Oh, that
it's
was
hard
a
to say the whole
fantastic
background.
answer. That was so great and very thorough and detailed. It's so interesting to think about like how you're using, the experiences, your lived experiences, the experiences of Black people within your community, but you're centering joy. I feel like that's the whole thing. Like we have these difficult things that we're experiencing possibly on a day to day. Life is just crazy. Everything that's
Mm.
expensive, capitalism running rampant, white supremacy is a thing, patriarchy is a thing, all the things, right? So it's like when you're in the studio, you don't want to be thinking about any of it. You want to escape.
No,
So
no.
yeah, you don't want to think about that at all. And so I love that you are centering joy and beauty in your work, and it's really felt. And because when you approach your work, well, when I approached your work, it really felt a sense of peace and serenity.
Hmm.
You want people to feel relaxed around your work because I can honestly say that I got that feeling the work when I experienced it for the first time. And interestingly enough, I'm wondering if that is because of the fact that you're using the water that you're using, right? Because the water holds memory. So I'm just
Yeah.
wondering if your work has this sort of calming effect because you're so intentional about your material usage. And I just really think it's beautiful. So thank you for giving such a thorough answer. I want to talk a little bit about when you use the water, it creates
Hmm.
things on your works, which is amazing. The water sort of does its own thing. So it's almost like co-creating with you, in a
That's
sense.
what I call it.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about like these veins, these roots, like that sort of look like lightning. How do you read those marks? And for you, what do you believe the message of those marks are?
Those are my favorite parts of the work, honestly. So I think of the ocean water and the ink as a partnership between me and the work being created. So essentially, the water I pick up is from places that have some type of history with enslavement in Black America, in one way or another. But the point of the collection of that water, and specifically about me collecting that water, is around the recapturing of an idea or an experience in a way that maybe won't be able to be read in any other way. And so this is kind of allowing a voice for the water is the way that I think about it, because essentially all I'm doing is mixing the water in with a thing that can be permanent, which is the ink. And so the water has an opportunity to speak. And I'll help it speak by just kind of splashing more water onto the surface. But essentially, whatever is left and however the water looks is all dictated on how it wants to be preserved before the environment evaporates it.
Mm,
And so I see that as an opportunity for me to reconciliate with an image of something or somebody that I can't touch.
mm,
And so I really have an amazing time with those kind of vain parts of it because that reminds us that water is flowing through us at all times. The reason that roots look like that and the reason that veins look like that is through that water. That spreading, that culmination of kind of this big thing multiplying and then dividing into all these different paths in the same way that people kind of think about the future is like you start at one point but where you could go depends on just how you you live your life. And so essentially the veins is kind of a path that was taken by the water, and maybe some other paths diverge, but like essentially they all end up on one image. So regardless of the fact, it's like all of these paths, including my path with the path of the water, end up here. And it was really, again, one of those opportunities for me to allow history to be able to be spoken without me having to mentally do all of the energy of addressing every single aspect of that history. And that was the biggest thing, is like I didn't want to ever give up on thinking about injustice, but I also wanted to create a space where I don't have to naturally just keep, you know, being direct on it, which I feel like is the whole point of identity now. It's like I know the things that make up my current situation, but also, you know, I'm still gonna live my own life. I'm still gonna be the person I am. I'm still gonna be an artist, regardless of the fact that there's trauma in my own DNA, but that essentially I can become more than that for myself in a way that I agree I wanna be, which is I wanna be an artist. And I wanna have a life where I can be happy doing that as my full time. And so essentially, I think about those paths in the same way. It's like you look at it, and me adding in more water just gives them more opportunity to spread and to create a message with the ink in one way or another. And the only time I ever get bad on myself is if I do something with that message and I can't get it to kind of turn over to towards something else. And so right now I'm recycling a lot of my older work that I don't think is very successful into collage work, so I can still utilize the opportunity that the messages that that I was left to be able to put them into something else. And so like that's my biggest thing right now, is I've been doing a bunch of little collages.
Amazing. So is this the first time that you've worked in collage?
Yeah, yes and no.
Okay.
So essentially, all of my work is like a collage because I'm kind of taking multiple different images and people and combining them to create the images that I paint. So imagine if I did like a digital collage and then created a painting from that, which a lot of people do, but like in my head, that's how I saw a lot of the things that I did. And it was funny because at the beginning of my process, because I'm you know, a good painter, you know, pat on my back, but like, because I'm a good painter, people would come into my studios and would see my works in person and thought they were actual collages. Like I cut out these nose and lips that I did and put them on, and I was like, no, I painted that.
I love
And they're like, oh, yeah, what is this? I was like, yeah, no, I painted that part, and then you did the rest of it. There's not a,
that.
you know, there's not a big nose and lip factory that I could cut out and put onto these paintings. So, yeah, no, so it's my first time physically going and cutting up works and then putting them together and creating and showing them as an art piece as collage. But outside of that, I've been thinking and working through collage in a lot of different ways.
So yeah, I would say that I sort of always felt like your work had a collage sort of sensibility. I'm
Yeah.
particularly drawn to collage as well. It's one of my favorite mediums to express in, and I really do believe that based on your what you're sharing about like your life experience, I almost sort of feel like your transformation in your life has been about that too. This sort of like amalgamation of like different experiences all put together and expressed. I want to talk a little bit
Mm.
about like how your own personal transformation or your own personal growth in your life directly informs your practice, because I do sort of have this understanding that there is a direct line, or we should be able to draw a direct line from our life to our work. So how do you feel like your own personal growth is synonymous with the growth and the expansion and either the beauty and success?
Yeah, so that's kind of the biggest thing in terms of the relationship between the transformation and the work and myself. And when I mean transformation, I mean like me using stained glass now, or me doing other things than just painting. So essentially, a lot of the reasons that the work looks like it does as well, along with me and my inspiration to water, but me also thinking about who am I. And at the first, when I started making work, I was like, ooh, I wanted to paint photorealistically. You know, it's usually in school, it's like, hey, can you make this box on the ground look as good as a drawing? And to be like, oh, that box is right here in front of us. You know, essentially, the whole aspect of in the beginning was technical skill, and could you, you know, replicate a good technical skill? And I did that. I got to a point where I was making photorealistic paintings, and I was like, oh yeah, and people loved them, but I was like, there's something wrong about this. There's something that's not here for me. Like I finally got to the end of the road on it, and I was like, this is still not it. And so what was huge for me was understanding, and this came a long time later, even though I started making it work before that, is that people are abstracted, and I needed abstraction to function and work one way or another. And the biggest reason that is because I grew up without a father. So it was like, there's a whole half of me that I have no idea about. Like a whole half. Like, everything is in terms of my father, looks, his family, anything like that. I don't have a clue about, which sometimes I need because the hospital asks and I don't have a clue what to tell them. But because of that relationship, I also don't know all of me in certain type of ways. I don't know, the uncle that I may get my personality from on my dad's side, or a grandfather or a grandparent that like has the same nose as me or something. I don't know that part, but again, I'm still wholly as a person. And it really came down to understanding that abstraction of identity, that unknown aspect, is not a fault, but also can be a very interesting aspect of my own identity. I
100%.
don't need to talk to him. I'm not looking to talk to him. I've messaged him on Facebook, but I'm good on the rest of that. So the point being is that, I felt like that abstraction of this identity, again, I don't know the history of the people who came here through the Middle Passage, but I know that they did. So like, what does that leave me? And that abstracted idea of like not knowing something is known is kind of crazy for me, because I know that I have to talk about the wholeness of myself
Yes.
through my art, but also I have to acknowledge that there's a whole part of this that is kind of essentially made up in my mind in terms of what is the reality, because I can't place names or places to any of those things, but they're there and they mean something because I mean something now. So it's like, how do I talk about something that is invisible in one way or another? In the same way, how do I talk about the messages that people left in the ocean and create an opportunity for them to speak in a way that's not understandable, but in a way that is visually interesting and that can interpret some type of emotions instead of an actual word in written language. And so water became an outlet to be able to create that space. It gave me tranquil, ideals. How can I allow it to speak for itself in a way that I can become a partner with the water to maybe share another message that's very abstracted, that's very out there, but also can be visually interesting, that can be a great story to tell, as well as, maybe more inspirational towards other people who have been in a way struggling with understanding that their identity is not completely one way or another. And so yeah, that growth between kind of understanding my relationship to my father, this abstracted idea of who I am, but this abstract understanding that I still am a whole person, is the most important aspect to creating, I guess, more dynamic works. Because now it's like, all right, I understand that, but like water also has multiple different phases, as well
I
as kind of
see.
adults do.
Yep.
You're youth, then you're, a young adult, then you're old, essentially. It's like those phases happen with people, those phases happen in water. How do I, as an artist, allow space for all of those phases to come into my practice? And sometimes I kind of force it, but other times I think that it comes naturally. Like the collage is kind of a natural thing that happened, but we'll see. I kind of overthink it sometimes, but that's essentially the whole.
It actually sounds like you're working through it, have worked through it, and you're able to articulate your thoughts and feelings and ideas about it so eloquently. And yeah, it's very inspiring. So, and thank you also for sharing something so personal about your dad, how that has impacted you and your work, has allowed and or created space for the imagined, really, through abstraction.
Yeah.
I think that is such a beautiful way that you have been able to, again, transform something that you've experienced. I want to talk a little bit about this quote that you had mentioned about the air of a story.
Mm-hmm.
I want to dive into it a little bit because I thought that that was so beautiful. And when I say air, I mean, the air. I'm thinking about like you specifically using water and how when the water dries, it's interacting with the environment.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know when a painting has told the stories that it needs to tell based upon this quote of air of the story.
Yeah, so that is really kind of one of those things where I was thinking about. I love listening to poetry. I also love listening to people create and make poems. I love, slam poetry, all different aspects of it, because I think that there's a relationship to not needing to be understood and something being understood. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, sometimes a poet will say something and you're like, what? But also, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was the whole idea of the air of a story, is because it was in my head. I was like, I'm creating something that essentially does not make sense, but also makes sense, because I have to think that there is a reality or a perception in my mind where this can be a potential, that there is voices in the water, and that I am allowing space for me to have conversations with those voices, but also in a way that's like, I'm not, schizophrenic. I'm talking in a more poetic language. And
Mm.
so the poetic aspect of air having a story is one that I really enjoy. And I feel like there's a lot of it now on the internet, but the people in talking to nature and allowing the environment to be able to communicate with you and through you has been something that really inspires me. As well as, again, I talked about that whole, the edge of the ocean is where the message is. And so it's like, how do you get that message delivered? And it's through wind pushing the water towards to the edge and waves hitting. And obviously all the aspects of science, because I love talking about science as well with the art, because there is a kind of key scientific aspect because of, salt and water and a combination of ink mixing that I'm really enjoying. But the point being is that I think that there's a relationship to the spiritual and the physical that happens, and air in all its knownness
Mhm.
is still kind of this space where like anything can happen,
Yeah.
because if you see a jar and it's empty, essentially you think there's nothing in there, but it's full of air. So like, it has presence.
Mm.
And so, it's really interesting to think about air in that way, as like, not just something, because this whole space is full of air. There's not a vacuum of things happening here. And if it did, I couldn't survive. So it's like, I need it as much as I need water.
Oh, that's so amazing to consider and think about as well. Because that's also making me think about how that air also, um, this may be a co-creator with you. Especially
Mm-hmm.
like when the water is drying on the surface. It could be the humidity in the air, or, whether or not you have the AC on, or, whether or not it's a really hot day, would also determine how that water dries, and, also impact the way that these vein-like or root-like structures sort of show up on the surface of your work. And that's really interesting to think about, this relationship between the physical and, like you said, the spiritual. And so I want to dive into that a little bit more. How has your perspective on the body, your own, the body of the collective, or the collective consciousness, people, and wellness changed through working in the types of media that you do?
I love this conversation so much because collective I've been talking so much about collective consciousness forever, because there's always something where I'll start something. It's specifically in the last kind of couple of things that I've been transforming in. So I'm really interested in doing sculpture now. If I start asking artists around, everybody's into sculpture right
Yeah,
now. And so
I've also started
when
working
I
with
started doing
sculpture as well.
things,
I just want to say, yeah,
it's a collective
yeah,
consciousness. I don't know what's happening, but everybody's like, "Hey, I want to start sculpture
hmm,
right now." And I'm looking around and I'm thinking like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do something different." And I hear like four other artists that I'm really friends of that are also painters being like, "Yeah, I'm gonna start start sculpting right now." So I think that collective consciousness, especially now, has been really interesting. And I don't know if it's a reaction to the climate, or just again like everybody having a connection to kind of the point that of the world that's going in terms of like a relationship to creativity. But I love talking about collective consciousness, because even when I started stained glass, I didn't see anybody, like no one, doing stained glass, and then I started it and I seen a bunch of people doing stained
crazy
glass,
how that
and there was
happened.
people who were doing stained glass before me, and I was like, oh, okay. And then other people, I was like, man, people coming from. I thought I was in a room by myself, or maybe with like five people. It was like, nah, 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 nah. We back
Yeah,
here
we
too.
all
Turn around.
here.
Yeah, I'm having a good time with it. But collective consciousness is crazy because it also puts you in a weird position to, if you're thinking you're original, to be like, oh,
Yeah, and
I don't
nothing
know if
new is
that's
made under
original.
the
You're like, I
sun.
don't even know if I can
Yeah.
go with it because somebody might be like, "You know." But anyway, regardless of the fact, I really enjoy talking about this idea of collective consciousness as well as like Mandela effects when people all seem to have the same type of memory of a thing
Yeah.
and they're like, no, that's wrong. But talking back about my body, and kind of this relationship between the transformation of my body and the pieces.
Hmm.
It's crazy because I am constantly, at least for the past 3 or 4 years, been really conscious of my body. I am a cheerleader. I also do a bunch of types of, yeah, I did a whole bunch of types of acrobatic type things. Even growing up, I used to just do backflips in the yard because everybody in my neighborhood just knew how to do backflips. It was just one of those
Yeah.
things. But then I became a full fledged cheerleader at high school and then all star, which is just cheerleading competitions versus other cheerleaders. And then I moved on to working for the NBA doing cheerleading for them,
Yeah.
for the Milwaukee Bucks. And then I did acro dunking, which is using trampolines to dunk. So essentially I was doing acrobatics with basketballs, and really just thinking about all these different things about how my body, like I'm really in tune with the way my body moves essentially. Like if I can turn myself 720 degrees in midair, like I'm really connected to my body.
That's
But
actually that's amazing. I also
it's had
never
a good
heard of
time.
what is it called?
Yeah,
I've
it's
never
acro
heard of
dunker.
that
It's
before. It's so
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. If you ever go to if you ever get the chance to go to the state's basketball game,
Yeah.
they have it where like during kind of a break or a timeout, there'll be guys that come out and they'll run down the court, jump on a trampoline, and then do maybe some type of trick and then dunk the ball.
Okay.
And there's also another kind of like slam dunking thing that people do, but essentially this is completely different. To say all of that is to say that yeah, I'm very considerate of my body, and getting older, I'm realizing that I'm like, oh my gosh, my knees are starting to
That's
hurt. So oh my god, because I used to just do stuff
yeah.
like jump off buildings and like front flip over cars on concrete,
Mhm.
and I got multiple videos of me like front flipping off of really high stuff onto
Yeah.
concrete or some type of hard surfaces, and my body's like, "Hey, remember that day 5 years ago when you decided to front flip over that car? Yeah, I feel it now." So I've been like really working on my health because I'm like, okay, hey, I gotta start taking care of these knees because if I get to about 70 and I want to move around my studio
Exactly.
and I can't walk, it's gonna be bad. So I'm trying to catch on to it right now before it gets bad. But like, yeah, the my own body in a relationship to the work is kind of like me taking care of both of
Mm,
us in a way. I think that if I want to take care of the artwork, I need to be able to be healthy enough to continue making it.
100%.
And if I am not healthy, then the artwork is not made. And I think that's the biggest thing with an artist is like, how do I keep doing this until the day that I have to call home? You know
100%.
what I'm saying? Like, how do I keep making art until I
Yeah.
die? Some people retire. Artists
No,
don't.
we
You don't
never
retire.
retire.
You never, even the people who have the conditions where they start losing their memory, like Alzheimer, they're still
Mhm.
making art. They're like they can't forget what their body is so adept at doing, and that's the
100%.
craziest part about being a creative is like even if I lose my memory, I still will have
Yeah.
art in my hand.
100%. It's like a part of us. Like we can't leave it behind at all. Like it's so funny you mentioned about working to the end of your life. That is such a beautiful thing to consider. That this is something that it's a marathon, right? Like it's not something that we're
Yeah,
just like focused on right now. And
yeah,
yeah, thinking about that, I'm really curious to know what you think about this idea of maybe the accolades that you might get because your work is incredible, right? So I think things that are inevitable. What's your thoughts on all of the things that come along with having like a life like this? The accolades, the mentions, the publications, all of these things. Like how do you see it and sort of where does that sit for you in I guess like in your importance in relationship to your practice as an artist? The value that you have within your work comes from inward or do you see it as sort of like that is like an affirmation, like an external affirmation? Curious to know what you think.
It's this is a really cliche answer, but it's
Mm,
both. And the great thing and the problem with this is because it requires both. So I need to both understand and feel and really want to make art for myself and create my own growth for myself to me for me personally to create legacy within my artwork. However, the accolades are for the outside world to acknowledge my hard
mm,
work. And some people's hard work never gets acknowledged, and other people's hard work only is acknowledged towards the end of their
mhm,
life. And so I have to kind of actively work towards both in a way where my current and future
mhm,
life can both benefit from those things. And that's kind of only just now started with art. Before this, the only way for you to be an artist and, some old period is if somebody wealthy was willing to spend money on you to like sleep in their house and make art for their family for the rest of your life. And you were like, well, shoot, as long as I get to make, I'll do it.
mhm,
That's not a bad deal. But essentially, like now, I have to have those publications. I have to have those accolades because the relationship between me, my work ending up in a museum, my work ending up on a secondary market, and maybe creating critical acclaim, but also kind of weird juxtaposed between my funds versus the funds of somebody selling the things that they bought for me is weird, but like essentially without those things, then somehow practice becomes disregarded. So like if I do really well now and I get all these accolades, but then somebody takes my work and puts it on the secondary market, it gets $100,000 this day, and but 2 years later it only gets 10,000. There's going to be a problem. People are going to now, regardless of the work that I've done, essentially say that, well, it's not worth it. I mean, like, what is, essentially worth mean in art because it's so loose. But, and there's a lot of people right now who are having a lot of problems with that because there was so much hype around collecting and then reselling certain type of artists, and that market for all of those things is
mhm.
changing. That art is really in a weird curious
Yeah.
place. And so I think that the accolades feel good. The accolades mean a lot in terms of overall understanding of my own
Mhm.
success, but it also means nothing in the space of the fact that if somebody outbids and then underbids me, those things get thrown away until maybe sometime later in my life where the curator is like, hey, there was this artist that I really liked, and what happened to
Yeah.
them? It's like, so it's really easy to be superstar and then not
Mhm.
known for a long period of time. And it's a lot of people have done that. Like, they say the first 3 years out of grad school is like the most visibility
Yeah.
you'll have. So, like, you have to make the most out of it. And so, a lot of me understanding, and my understanding is that, right now the work needs to be managed in the same way that Beyonce manages her career,
Yeah, we all have
where
Beyonce management.
she'll
Okay.
do
This one.
and she'll do everything, and then she'll change it up
Yeah.
completely. And some people hate it, and other people love it. But essentially, she's creating something new. She's not doing rewind tours or
100%.
tours of old music. This is like no, everything is always new. Even if you loved all the love songs in the 2000s, I'm doing country now, and either
Right.
you like it or
And a
you
lot of
don't. But
people
I'm
did
still
not
gonna
want to
sell out the
change. Yeah.
stadium. And you got to because again, doing reunion tours is cool for a quick buck, but like, where's the
Mm,
legacy gonna come in at? And so I'm thinking about my own legacy, and the problem is that I need to continue to keep
yeah.
growing because the only way my legacy could stay as high as it is now is only if I
Mm,
die. And that's like, I don't want to die
yeah.
right now. I want to keep making work forever, or at least till I'm 120. So, and with modern medicine, we might be able to pull it. But the point being is that I can't stay stagnant. I
Yeah.
can't continue making the same thing. I have to
Mm,
innovate. I have to keep creating with my own originality at the base of it too, which is the hardest part. It's like it's hard to be super
yeah.
original. Like the ocean water thing is my own. Like nobody else can take that
Mm,
from me. So I have to be able to figure out how do I make that even more interesting, more dynamic. And sometimes I'll do stuff and people don't like it. And sometimes I'll do stuff in kind of a search for a new discovery that people are like, ah, I'll wait for him to start doing his old stuff. And maybe I will go back to those old things. But at the end of the day, like I still have to make something new. I have to kind of create this opportunity for me to discover more in the work, as well as to allow the voice of the differences in water and the transformations in an adult's life to be able to progress in the work in one way or another to create that longevity. And so I think the biggest thing is the internal parts. The outside accolades are fleeting sometimes, and you have to remember that, because at first I didn't. When I first started and I was getting a lot of accolades, I thought like this was the thing. But as soon as that market
Yeah.
changes and you're not either the hottest thing out, super interesting, then there's people who give up on
Mm.
you. Even if the work is fantastic, they're like, well, we can't benefit from this in one way or another, which is a
Yeah.
whole nother conversation. But essentially, the accolades can be fleeting, especially in this fast paced, digital area of social media and whatnot. Because before, if it was like you were put in a news article in the New York Times, people saw that newspaper once a week, and then they had to think about that whole thing, and then you lead up to this exhibition that happens after being told in the news 3 months from now. And people are like, "Well, we're so bored because we don't have anything else to do. We'll go to this event." But so like long you could have times in art where you're gone for 5 years back in the day and then come back out with a hit and they're like, yeah. If you've gone 5 years now, people are just assuming that you don't make art
Yeah.
anymore. Like if you're not, updating posts or doing shows in one way or another, you're like, oh, he must have just never made anything again. He must be in academia or something. Like, yeah, you immediately get turned to the side. So I love internally working
Yeah.
on myself and internally making new stuff, because again, I want to have a career that's long, but I also want to have a career that's expansive and that's interesting and that can pull back people, hundreds of years from now. Because once the greatest of the people who die, who are the people that are both inspired by them, carry on their legacy, and also then we'll do a reunion tour of their hologram or something. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, how do I create that?
Yeah.
Oh
Speaking
my
of
god.
holograms, okay. So I
Speaking, speaking.
I want to talk to you a little bit about AI. And yeah,
Oh my
to
goodness.
where we are right now in the world, experiencing rapid growth and transformation through AI.
Huge.
What are your thoughts about it? And if any, do you see yourself maybe collaborating with AI in some way, shape, or form that could maybe enhance or aid or help or expand your storytelling using data and technology? Do you see yourself in your practice? Because you did mention like you're constantly wanting to grow and expand and reinvent yourself, really,
Mhm.
and just like thinking about like, where we are in the world. AI is a thing that's here to stay. However much we hate it, it's here, right? So how do you view it, and what do you think about incorporating that, or do you see yourself incorporating that into your practice in some way, shape, or form in the future? Or now, I don't know if you use it.
No, no, no. I don't use anything AI related. I actually hate AI in a lot of different ways. Only because, and this might sound a little elitist to me, because there are people who utilize AI as an opportunity to try to talk down on original artists and original artwork. So there'll be times where online you'll see somebody, especially on Twitter, mainly on Twitter, you'll see someone post an image and then will be like, I made it better using AI. And you're like, no, you didn't. You didn't. What are you
Yeah.
talking about? First of all, it takes all the effort away. It takes all of the things that made it really interesting away. And so AI for artwork, I despise only because of the relationship between people who cannot make artwork, utilizing it as a gotcha to people who are dedicated to spending the hours into creating something that they really enjoy. Because they're like, I can change this commercial with the 2 clicks, and the whole thing you did with your group of people, I can do with AI really quick. AI, like, first of all, that looks like garbage compared to what I was
Right.
doing over here. And I think that thing of people trying to, talk down to other artists or creatives or people in that type of function and saying that they can do it better and faster for cheaper using AI. And usually those things may work, but they always never look as good. And I think that really grinds my gears in terms of the relationship to AI. I think AI is really good at a lot of different things in terms of opportunities for quick and easy shortcuts to some things that will help out
Mm.
humans. But you obviously know that there's so many people that are doing stuff with AI in terms of especially the deep fake and all these kind of like conspiracy
Mm.
theories, or like the random videos where you'll see something, it'll be somebody's face, and you'll be like, look, it's that person. And they're like, I never
Yeah.
did that. That's AI. But also create space for like somebody, oh, that's not me. That's AI. And you'll be like, that's you on camera. Like, oh, no, that's not me. So it also creates opportunities for kind of denial of
Mm.
truths in one way or another. I think that AI is really interesting as a tool for researching
Yeah.
certain things, but also as a kind of precursor to that research. Because sometimes AI will set you up and it'll be like, yeah, this thing is true. And then you ask like an expert and they're like, no,
Mm.
not really. So, if you know a certain topic, then AI is really unreliable in a lot of different ways because it can only work on the information that's
Yeah.
given to it. So it's a lot of different things. I'm still hand to
Mm.
paper type of person. So even now in my emails, I hate writing emails because I'm terrible at typing. I'm definitely a typer, and I usually write stuff down. Like I don't use my phone to for notes very often. But now they're creating stuff where if I write it down on paper, it goes directly to my phone. So I'm
Mm.
looking into ways of
Oh.
utilizing my traditional methods of communication and creating to see what digitalized versions of that
Mm.
can look like. And I think that AI can do a lot of different things in terms of like fixing up and rendering down certain problems that you might have as an artist or in certain type of ways, but in things of fully creating something or trying to talk down about other artists, I think I don't like it. But that being said, I don't plan on using it. I think that there's so many different kind of traditional ways of making that I utilize, and maybe not all the way traditional because sometimes I'll use a projector if I'm like working on something very large and I need to create the spacing of an image. If it's like too large, because I don't want to. Proportions are such a unconcerning thing that if I just focus on working on a painting for 3 hours just because I'm trying to get the proportions correct,
Yeah.
yeah, but like if I'm like, okay, I can take this image, blow it up on a projector, and just kind of draw out what I need to get the proportions right, and that'll take me 15 minutes. Why would I not use it? Which is why I think that AI can do the same thing. It's like, hey, I have some gradients that I want to do on this image after I've been coloring it for 3 hours. Instead of going down and blending every single thing, I can program something to be able to blend this
Mm.
down, and then if anything, I can retouch it. Like those little things, I think are fantastic to help in one way or another, and that's usually where I'm at. But also, you have meme coins and all the NFTs and other aspects of art that I think are really interesting. But that's a whole nother
Yeah.
side of like online galleries, and there's a place for people to live
Mm.
online, and I think that should be cultivated in a way that's functioning and helpful to real people. But I think if it goes anything past that, it's a little too much for me specifically. But yeah, I think that AI works out well for stuff like that, like finishing up a problem or fixing a little issue that could have taken you multiple years or time to do, and then just breaking it down into like a couple of minutes in terms of like finishing and
Mm.
refining something. Like, I drew this image and it's not as sharp as I want it to be. Like, a little sharpness or something like that. In the same way that, photo editors
Mm.
do photos. Like, instead of going into Photoshop, you can just click a button on a photo editor and it readjusts it. I think those are fine, but taking a whole face off of somebody and then putting it on something else or making a mouth move on your photo is too much. It just went right past the line of like, oh, this is cool to like, oh, this is
Yeah.
creepy. So I think that AI is one of those things where as long as it's used as a tool to help out an actual human do
Mhm.
their thing in one way or another, that's not either talking down or creating space where another person's work is diminished or something like that, is perfectly fine.
Yeah, what a great answer. I have sort of like a follow-up question to that.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about tech as a way to preserve or shape the spiritual environment and layers in your work,
Mm-hmm.
how do you feel like that could potentially be a thing or show up? Because I was thinking about your water processes and I immediately thought, okay, so I just did this conference and speak. which is why I'm interested in like the
Mm.
tech questions. It was like a tech creativity, media, music, and arts conference called South by Southwest. Have you heard of it? Yeah,
Oh
it was
yeah,
really interesting, and I did like a VR and AR like sort of experience, like where you just put like the virtual reality headset on. It was so
yeah.
interesting because this lady, she had this sort of she was from Ukraine, and she had this experience where you could essentially like be in space, and you could put your hands
Mm.
up, and you could feel like you're touching something, but it's like all of these symbols around. I actually thought about that experience and thought about your work and thought that it could be so incredibly amazing. People could experience your work virtually. Like there's group like
Mm.
lines as like a virtual reality experience in some way, shape, or form. Could you actually like see yourself
Mm.
doing something like immersive like that, like where people could feel like they're in the painting?
Yeah, no. So I think that there's some things that I'm really interested in terms of the relationship to technology, the person, and then
Mm,
like feeling it. So there's one of my favorite artists and kind of one of my biggest inspirations is Wangechi Mutu. And with her work, she does these large scale video pieces that kind of spread across multiple walls. And I've seen artwork like this before in talking about completely different artwork where someone will project like a walkway that people walk through and it's like projections on both sides of like ocean water or kind of these other experiences. I think that my biggest thing is I would want to do something like that where you can fully engage your
mm,
body in a sense, only because I think that I want you to feel it all the way around instead
mm,
of only here. So I think that the biggest thing is I'm really interested in turning space into a functioning
mm,
headset, essentially. I think that there's a way for you to be able to see yourself in that space without, the process of trying to understand that you can't look at yourself when you have only the headset on. Because I just feel like there's so much that happens between
yeah.
you and your body. In the same way that what is his name? I cannot remember, but he does works where he basically cuts out a section of a wall and then there's like a glow. But as an
Is it
artist,
James Turrell?
he's fantastic. That's what
Okay.
I'm thinking. Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes,
I've
yes, 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 yes.
experienced his work
Okay, I
and
wanted to
it's
say
incredible.
Joseph, and I was like, no,
Yeah.
that's not it. But yes, Dan Terrell's work and the way that his boxes
Mm,
work. And there's one I think I did. I can't remember where it was or Massachusetts or somewhere up higher than New York, where you go in and the whole
yeah.
space is an installation by James Terrell. And I think that that's the best way to do it because I was in the space of me looking at other
Mm,
people, experiencing with them this opportunity for this room to entirely change so much that this glow of just color makes me aware of my emotions at the time of me being in that
100%.
space. So like when the room changed from a red to a blue or a green, or how that transition between light really functioned with the way that it interacting with my body. What does the shadows on the floor do for these opportunities of me kind of experiencing transformation in my own kind of perplexed idea of what space I am in. So I think that that would be the way that I want tech to work for me because I feel like those things would be dope in terms of you seeing your whole body feeling it and the changes in color. So yeah, I think that like Wangechi Mutu meets
Oh,
James
that would be
Terrell
incredible.
would be
That
my
would be so cool.
that would be my
Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna call it my own.
100%. Yeah, I immediately thought of James Charles because I think I also experienced it. I think it was at Mass MoCA. Did you go there? Yeah,
Yes, I think that's
yeah.
where it
And
was.
I've
That's why
never
I said,
experienced an artwork like that before, but and you also had to be there.
no,
It's a visceral, physical experience. Photos just don't do justice. Like you have to feel it in your entire body.
not at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
definitely see that. Absolutely. The full embodiment of that. And speaking of the body again, I just want to quickly touch on, we talked a little bit about like where you are right now and thinking about like how you look after yourself. I wanted to ask you if you have any sort of like
Yeah.
wellness practices that sort of foundation your self-care that allow you to show up at the studio whole and feeling well. Some things that sort of like root you and ground you. Like things that run alongside of your studio practice, wellness practices.
Yeah, so this was really wild to say. I tell my girlfriend the same thing and she doesn't understand it all the time. But essentially, I am a person that if you don't want to do
Mm,
something, don't do it. And if you want to do
mm,
something, do it. And as long as you can do it and be happy about it, then why wouldn't you? Which makes sense as just like a saying, but put into practice, it's like, she'll wake up and she'll be like, I should leave the house. And I'm like, why? And she'll be like, because you're supposed to get outside and do stuff. I was like, who told you that? Like, you don't have to do
yeah,
none of that. It's like, do you have to do something today? No, but I feel like I should just leave.
everywhere.
For what? It's one of those things where it's like in my head, my basic wellness is this. If I get to a point where I know I'm not gonna, I know I'm motivated all the way to do what I want to do, and I know art is gonna always be there. But if I am in a space where I'm like, I don't have to work right now, sit down. I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
I'll sit down. And then I'll get up and do this thing later, or I get to a point where I end the day and I'll be like, I didn't do anything, but tomorrow going home with full force head. And so I think there's a relationship between not putting stress on the body in terms of forcing yourself to do uncomfortable things that you don't have to do. I think that the biggest thing and the greatest thing that I've ever heard is in terms of the relationship to wellness in the body is a woman who was 98 outliving her doctor after her doctor told her she shouldn't drink Dr. Pepper every single day. And and she was in the interview and she was like, he told me never he not to stop drinking Dr. Pepper every single day or I'll die, and I outlived him. And I was like,
You just want to bring your own drum,
I,
really.
oh, yeah, it's the same as like people who
Yeah.
smoke their whole life but live longer than people who are really healthy. Because again, the biggest thing and the biggest takeaway for me in those situations is they understood that stress affects your body so much more than any outside things. Like, yeah, you don't want to do those things because you essentially could live less, but what also makes it so that you die early
Mm,
is stress. If you create space, there's people who get fully sick and are bedridden, and their doctors are like, we don't know what this is, and only to later find out that it was
right.
just stress induced. Stress
It
is
kills. It
hard on the
kills.
body. It
Mhm.
kills you. And so it's like my biggest thing is creating opportunities for
Mhm.
less stress. Because I don't smoke and I don't drink very often. Like I'll drink on an occasion or something like if I'm out. But like I don't
Mhm.
drink at home. I don't smoke at home. And the only thing I do drink is water when I'm here. I don't even drink
Mhm.
juices or anything. So like I don't have the outlet of going for a smoke or going for a drink to relieve stress. So like how do I create space where I can live the way that I want to and that I'm, passionate about, but also decrease that amount of stress? Because if I can't go out for a smoke break because
Yeah.
I'm not feeling it, well then what do I do? So my whole motivation is create opportunities for you to naturally do what your
Mhm.
body wants you to do instead of forcing yourself to do unnecessary things. Now, obviously, and this comes with as long as you take care of your own responsibilities. So, like, that's my biggest thing with her is like, if you have to do something, gotta go do it. And then when you finish doing it,
Right.
relax all you want. But if you don't have to do nothing,
Just rest.
why are you worried about it? You'll get it. You'll get there. You'll figure it out. You'll find a way to get it happening. And I've done that a lot of times. Where even in certain times where I'm like, I don't know how I'm gonna do it. I
Mhm.
figure out how I'm gonna do it, and I do it, and it gets done. So I really am relaxed because I know in myself that if it really comes down to it, and things are starting to hit the fan, that I can get something on the back of the fan
Yeah.
and relax and be like, okay, I got this take care of. So yeah, no, keeping stressed out is my
Mhm.
biggest thing, and working out now, which is a crazy roller coaster ride because working out is such a thing where like you do it for 3 months and then something will happen,
Mhm.
you
It's
stop
so
for a
tough.
year and a half, then you get back to it, and you come
Yeah.
back and you try it. So right now I'm on my like 12th cycle of me going to the
Yeah.
gym hard, try to like make the gym work. Because, back in the day, if this was, a long time ago, the only way that I could get that exercise was by chasing my food for the day. So
So you have to
so
schedule the
like,
time then.
going to the gym,
Yeah.
you do, and it's like getting to the gym is the
Hmm.
hardest part. But also the second hardest part is finding a workout that you want
Exactly.
to keep doing. Like you can't keep the same workout because your body will get
Mhm.
stagnant. So like now I gotta work out and I gotta think about this and I gotta make sure that I change up my workout every now and then so my body isn't like the same old thing. We'll get ready and then like not
Yeah.
grow or change at all. So yeah, it's a wild ride. I think that basically avoiding
Hmm.
stressful situations, lowering stress in multiple different ways, and obviously being active as much as you
Yeah.
feel comfortable in is like my biggest philosophy. Like obviously, again, I'm working on my knees. I
Hmm.
want those to be healthy. So like, there's no pressure for me to go do that. I want to do that because
Right.
I want that relief. But like some people will be like, I gotta go to the gym. You're like, why are you going to the gym?
I
I
don't know.
just
I'm
because
just
I know I'm
going.
supposed to.
Yeah.
Like I know I'm supposed to. You're like, what? So no, no, no. I need my motivations in order. In order. So yeah, that's the biggest thing.
Hari, this is the last question that I have for you. This has been such a pleasure
What?
chatting with you. And wow, your practice is beautiful. And I really see a bright future ahead of you. You're so inspirational to me specifically and thrilled to be in conversation. So the last question that I have is, what is the dream or like what is the legacy for you that you want to leave behind with your work?
Yeah, so that's like the biggest thing I'm thinking about right now too is kind of like what is that dream? So in my head, I want to create opportunities for other artists. I want to create opportunities for more growth, but I also know that my success is a determiner of how well I can help
Hmm.
other
Hmm.
people. Even now, there was a point where when I was first making work and selling a lot of work through, outside means in one way or another, that money that I got, I immediately tried to reinvest in both my family and as well as like my community. So like I at a point where I was making a lot of money, I would give money to my mom's and she'd be like, "What's this for?" And I'd be like, "Cuz,"
Hmm.
and my mama. So, or my grandmother or even my
Hmm.
my siblings, it's like, "Yeah, I got it. I'll help you out." But like also, if I don't got it and y'all need that help, who's going to give it to you? So like my success is a key component to the way that I relate to my opportunities to help other people, as well as my grandfather was one of those guys that like anybody in the neighborhood could be like, oh, if you want help, you can go to Al, and Al will be able to help you. And he was the guy that people would come to and be like, this thing
Hmm.
is a problem, and only because he was who he was and the way that he handled the things that were going wrong around was a huge part. And when he left, or when he died, essentially, a lot of that changed. And there was a lot of people that kind of fell off to the wayside because there was
Hmm.
nobody there to help them. So, like, my biggest thing is trying to figure out ways, especially in my own legacy, how do I create enough success that my legacy can still help people even
Hmm.
when I'm not around? In the same way that I feel like people having their own foundations, like I think Joanne Mitchell and all these other foundations, after they, or people who own the Guggenheim and that being only a collection at a long time, and then it became a whole museum that now uplifts and creates opportunities for artists' careers to,
Hmm.
skyrocket. Like this whole Rasheed Johnston show is
Amazing.
fantastic. And that's happening in the Guggenheim right now. And it's like, how do I create space for potentially
Yeah.
some to be like that? And where do I create a legacy for stuff like that? Because again, I want to create, non-profit organizations and residencies that can help artists because I think that there's so much or so many things that are having people get taken away from artwork, even in schools. Like right now, I'm working with kids doing an after-school program in art, and I'm like, what are your regular art classes? And they're like, we
Mm-hmm.
don't have art. I'm like, you don't have art? And it's like, no, no, no. After second grade, we stop having art until high school. And you're like, so what do y'all do? We got like a music class or we
Wow.
do something
That's
else. And
very
it's like,
unfortunate.
so y'all have
Yeah.
no art classes. It's crazy, and it's like, why would we take away art? Because there's so many aspects of all the other classes that involve art. There's science in art. There's critical thinking, English, all of these different things in art. But like it's getting taken away, and so I'm just that's my biggest thing, and that's my honor
Mm-hmm.
as an artist to do. as an artist that is successful is to try to figure out a way to give back, especially to my community. And there's even been opportunities in certain times where if I had the money and somebody was like, man, if I just had this piece of equipment, this could change my career. And maybe it don't, but essentially if you believe it
Yeah.
enough, maybe it will. And so I've given money to other artists and been like, hey,
Mm.
buy that printer, buy that a piece of equipment that you need, buy that sewing machine that you were wanting to use because it works faster than the one that you've been using that you got from your
Yeah.
grandmother. Keep that one, obviously, but like, here's something, here's some money
Yeah.
while I got it. Help you do more of your own art. And some of those people I've helped have become
Yeah.
wildly successful. And some of those people, have stopped making art. But like the whole point is that if you had the opportunity and I give
Mm.
it to you, take it. Even if you stop though, and you're like, I just didn't want to make art. What's the problem with that? Again, my whole thing is stress relief. But as long as you did something that you wanted to at that moment, you won't regret that. And that's also my biggest thing is like
Yeah.
no regrets. I hate things. I hate kind of getting to a point where I'm like, oh, I should have did that. I did that,
Mm.
when I was younger, and I was like, no, never again.
Yeah.
Can't do that because the last thing I want to do is leave life and be like, on my deathbed and be like, I wish I
That's the
could have
worst,
just
right? That's the
no.
worst feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, I feel like you're gonna leave such an incredible legacy. You've already made such an incredible splash in the art world, and yeah, you're doing bits. And so I just want to wish you well along your journey.
thank you.
And where can people find you?
They can find me basically
Right?
on Instagram or on my website, which I really need to update. But my Instagram is Khari Khari dot Raheem Raher Instagram. That's the best place because I post all my updated images and I post when I'm, finishing something or if an event is happening. I love posting on there because a lot of people come to that
Hmm.
space to see images. And so it's really great. Any other social media is just for crap posting. So I wouldn't advise for any other social media other than Instagram. I think I was gonna start a TikTok and then they got to a
Yeah.
point where they were like, we're gonna ban TikTok. And I was like, oh no. And then they were like, actually, we're not. And I just took away all that equipment. And anyway, so no, though
Okay.
so Instagram is basically the best place, or my website, which is www.khariturner.com because my first name is Khari and my last name is Turner.
Amazing.
But I use Raheem because
Okay.
that's my middle name.
Everyone can find Kahari there. Thank you so much, Kahari. This is incredible. What an amazing, amazing conversation. Thank you so much for your insights and,
Thank you.
just being vulnerable and open to sharing your story. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Artifacts, where we explore the art of creative living. I'm your host, Gherdai Hassell. If today's conversation moved you, inspired you, or sparked something within you, share it with someone who might be interested and who might need it too. You can connect with me on social media at Hassell_free or on my website at www.gherdaihassell.com, or you can join my print club. Until next time, keep creating, keep feeling, and remember, art affects everything. See you next time.